Breaking news for you. And if you're a Man City fan, you'll be particularly interested because John Stones, who has left as a free agent, is now an Inter player. They've signed John Stones on a free transfer. He joins on a 2-year deal. Remember, he had interest from Arsenal and Chelsea, but Stones wanted a new chapter in Italy, and John Stones now plays for Inter. Now, to a day of major upheaval at Newcastle. Eddie Howe has left the club after 5 years in charge, with El Ahly's manager, Matthias Jessler, expected to take over. Our reporter Keith Downey is at St James's Park and joins us now. Right, Keith, Newcastle fans are saying, who's this Jessler? Who is he?
It's funny that you say that just now, Mike, because there's two Newcastle fans just to my right-hand side who've just came up and asked that exact question, because this has come right out of the blue. You're probably looking at the options at the start of the summer. The likes of Oliver Glasner was available, Andoni Iraola was available. Of course, there was a big managerial merry-go-round, and it means there's now less options for Newcastle just 3 weeks before the start of the season. But I am assured from sources within the club that the German, would have been one of the options, or one of the people they would have liked to have spoken to had Eddie Howe left at the end of the season. Now, I'm told that Eddie Howe communicated to the club after the defeat to Fulham on the last day of the season that perhaps it was time for a change, perhaps he'd lost his spark and his energy had dissipated to some extent. But he had a couple of days to think about it. The club talked him around and he stayed. And it was only once he returned back from his family holiday 3 weeks ago and he recommunicated to the club that he was still struggling and wondering whether he was the right man to take things on, that the club realised that, yeah, maybe a decision should be made. It was all on Eddie Howe. He decided to go, but the club realised, yeah, we have to try and find a new man. And that is when the talks began. Jessler, and that is why the news broke this morning, because Newcastle are now advanced in the negotiations with the 38-year-old, and we do expect him to be announced as Newcastle United's new manager within the next 24 hours. There was a chance of that being announced today. It might go into tomorrow now. Remember, Mike, we still don't have an official statement from Newcastle United that Eddie Howe has left. But in terms of his managerial statistics, in terms of his managerial ability, he spent a couple of years over at RB Salzburg, where he won the title twice, and he's been with Al Ahly for the last 3 years over in the Saudi Pro League. I'm told he's a front foot manager, plays the high press, and is very similar in his style in terms of high energy, attacking style that Eddie Howe likes to play. So at least he will be able to suit the players at his disposal, and he's going to have to get to work quickly, because as we know, the Premier League season begins in 3 weeks' time, and Liverpool come calling here in 24 days' time. So he's going to have to get to work pretty quickly.
Absolutely is. Another question that Newcastle fans will be dying to hear is, what does Howe's departure mean for the skipper Bruno Guimaraes?
Yeah, look, I mean, Mike, I've been reporting for weeks now that Newcastle are perplexed. I think they're growing in frustration that Bruno Guimaraes has become unsettled at the links with Arsenal. We know that the Brazilian has told Newcastle he would be keen to explore a move away from the club to Arsenal should Newcastle get an acceptable bid from the champions. What is an acceptable bid? I would suggest it starts with an 8. I think that's what Newcastle would be looking for. They do not want to lose him under any circumstances, but I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for Newcastle to hold on to their captain now that Eddie Howe is gone. The two of them had an incredible relationship. They were so close. And I just think that when you look at the sporting director, Ross Wilson, David Hopkinson, the chief executive, they've been in the door for less than a year here, and they don't have the same relationship with Bruno Guimaraes that understandably Eddie Howe has, having been here for nearly 5 years. So, look, Newcastle do not want to lose their skipper. They've said that he is not for sale, but it's really up to Arsenal now to come to the table and put in an official bid. As we stand here right now at 7:10 on Thursday evening at the end of July, as I understand it, Newcastle still have had no direct contact from Arsenal regarding Bruno Guimaraes. Yes, talks have taken place via intermediaries, but until Arsenal actually contact Newcastle and put a bid on the table, only then can Newcastle begin to talk. What makes it even more interesting, Mike, is that Newcastle are set to fly out to La Manga for their pre-season training camp tomorrow. Bruno Guimaraes is set to take part in that. It'll be really interesting to see if and when he turns up for that, because the whole situation revolving Eddie Howe and the fact he's left the club today just kind of dilutes things even more, and I think it almost eases the pathway more for Bruno Guimaraes to leave should Newcastle receive an acceptable bid for Arsenal. But I stress that has not come yet, despite the fact there's been weeks of reports that Newcastle are in talks with Arsenal. I can tell you that is not the case.
Yeah, that's not come, and neither has, as you said, the statement from Newcastle about Eddie Howe. We await that with interest. Keith Downey, live from St James's Park. Thanks, Keith. Well, Sky Sports' Jamie Carragher was surprised at the timing of Howe's departure, but believes he'd taken the club as far as he could and didn't have the energy to build a new team.
Surprised because I think it's always a surprise when a manager leaves in pre-season or there's only a few weeks to go before the start of the season. I wouldn't have been surprised if this decision would have happened at the end of last season. Eddie Howe's done a brilliant job, and that team's gone as far as it can go. It can't achieve any more, that team. It won a trophy. It got into the Champions League twice. I think it got into the knockout stages at least once, maybe twice. And there wasn't any more for that team to do. And I just thought, is Eddie Howe going to sort of build another team again like he built that team 4 or 5 years ago? But it just looks like he hasn't really got the energy for it anymore. And it takes a lot out of your manager, Newcastle. I mean, Newcastle aren't Man United or Liverpool, but they're a huge football club, and they're one club in one city. So you can imagine the demands, the intensity of that every day. And Eddie Howe is a really intense manager. And I think last season took a lot out of him. And obviously we know recruitment didn't go well for them last season. They had a poor season by their standards, and it was time to refresh, let these players move on, get maximum money for them and build a new team. But to build a new team is probably going to take 2 or 3 years again. So I think Eddie Howe's probably just looked at the pre-season. Obviously, the Bruno situation looks like it's going to kick off shortly as well. And maybe he just ran out of the energy and that intensity that makes him the manager that he is. But he will go down as an absolute icon, legend at that football club, what he did. I'm a huge admirer of Eddie Howe, and he's done a fantastic job. And he's probably made a decision that's probably right for him and also the football club.
Now, Real Madrid are expected to bid for Manchester City's Rodri as they prepare a bid of between 43 and 51 million pounds. Now, that bid's lower than would be expected for a Ballon d'Or winner because he just has a year left on his City contract. Manchester City, though, keen on retaining Spain's World Cup winning captain, and they hope he'll sign a new deal.
I think 40, 50 million. I mean, if you're Manchester City, what's the point in selling him? You might as well just keep him for the extra year. He's as good as anybody in that position in the Premier League. We're probably the best, isn't he? Right now, you've seen what he was like in the World Cup. Seemed like he was back to his best. I thought the second half of the season, him and Bernardo Silva were fantastic and almost took Manchester City to the title. So if I was the manager of Manchester City, I'd be keeping Rodri at that price. It'd have to be something really special to want me to lose, you know, arguably the best midfield player in world football. If I was Manchester City, I'd be keeping him and letting him go on a free. You know, I think he paid 60 million for him, getting 40 million back now. What can they do with that type of money? Not a lot, really. So I'd rather keep him. I think Rodri comes into the camp of a Roy Keane or a Patrick Vieira. And for me, I've always said Roy Keane was the top of that list of that type of sort of real central midfield player, holding midfield player. And I think Rodri and him, it's you know, it's a toss of a coin, really. So that's how highly I rate him. I think there's probably only Roy, if anybody, has been better than Rodri in that sort of holding midfield position, sort of dictate and play in the Premier League.
Start with the stunning news this evening that UEFA will boycott all FIFA tournaments if Gianni Infantino goes ahead with his proposal to sell off a stake in the World Cup. Our chief correspondent, Kaveh Solokol, is here, been across this story throughout the day and beyond. So we had a meeting today. Tell us what happened.
Well, look, this meeting was called an emergency meeting by UEFA. All their 55 member FAs attended the virtual meeting. And the reason they had this meeting is they wanted to decide how to respond to Gianni Infantino's controversial plan to sell off a stake in the World Cup to private investors. Now, if you're a football fan, there's good news coming for you because UEFA killed off the plans to set up a European Super League a couple of years ago, and they're also in the process of killing off Gianni Infantino's plan to sell off a stake in the World Cup. The meeting lasted around 2 hours. More than half the 55 FAs spoke out against FIFA's plans, and when they had a vote, it was unanimous, 55-0. They all backed the proposal that they would take the unprecedented step of boycotting all FIFA tournaments unless Gianni Infantino killed off this plan. And they don't just want Gianni Infantino to kill off the plan, they also want assurances from FIFA that FIFA will never try to do something like this ever again. So a really, really strong, united position from UEFA. And I've been reporting a long time. I read a lot of statements that are basically seem to have been written by ChatGPT. If you've got time, read the statement from UEFA today, because it's a great, great statement, and it sums up exactly the way the vast majority of football fans I know have been feeling this week.
Indeed, but words are cheap, Carve. Would UEFA really boycott a World Cup?
I've got to tell you, I'm going to give you a straight answer. Yes, they would. They feel so strongly about this that if FIFA carry on down this road, if Gianni Infantino thinks he's still got the support of enough football associations around the world to do this, then I think UEFA will stick to their position. And their position is they will not play in any FIFA tournaments. I don't think this is an empty threat. I understand what you're saying, because this has never happened before. We've never had a confederation come out and say we are going to boycott FIFA tournaments. But I think the feeling in UEFA is enough is enough. Really. Do we have to take any more of this from Gianni Infantino? We've had 10 years of this. Yes, he's increased the amount of money that federations are getting. He's quadrupled how much money the federations are getting. But what has he actually done to football? Where are we heading? And who has given him the authority to sell off a stake in one of world football's crown jewels? Certainly not us, and we're not going to stand for it.
But Carve, you stand there, you tell me this frequently, this is not a European game, it's a world game. There are 211 associations. What happens if Infantino says, oh, don't need Europe, and he doesn't back down?
OK, well, if he carries on down that road, what's the road going to look like? The road's going to look like this. And I think he's been getting first-hand experience of what the future could look like if he doesn't back down, because of the phone calls he will have been taking today. I think he will be taking phone calls from investors, bankers, some of the richest, most powerful people in the world. Who knows, maybe President Trump has even found time in his busy schedule to call Gianni Infantino. And what they'll be saying to him is, Gianni, what the hell is going on? We were going to buy a stake in the World Cup. What kind of World Cup is it without European teams? How are you expecting us to put billions of dollars into this venture when you can't deliver what you promised? You're not going to get us Spain, the world champions. You're not going to get us England, the semi-finalists. You're not going to get us France, the World Cup semi-finalists. Germany, Italy. These are the teams that we want. This is why we're investing all this money. At the same time, he'll also be taking phone calls from members of the FIFA Council, from the heads of confederations, from the heads of football federations. They will be saying, Gianni, what's been going on? You've been plotting behind our back. Why did you not consult us? What kind of way is this to run an organisation as big as FIFA? And also, whenever journalists like that idiot on Sky Sports News, Carve Solokol, slag us off, yeah? What we always say is, hang on a second, we are a not-for-profit organisation, and all the money we make goes back into football. Well, if we go ahead with this plan, guess what? We won't be able to say that anymore, because we won't be a not-for-profit organisation, and all the money that we make won't go back into football.
OK, so all of that said, his position, is he now vulnerable? Could he go?
I don't know. If you don't like him, and lots of people in world football don't like him, you'll be thinking perhaps this is it. This is the end of Gianni Infantino. Surely, you know, we get a situation with the political leaders when they have a flagship policy and they don't get the votes in Parliament. Sometimes they do the honourable thing and they resign and they fall on their sword. Is that what Gianni Infantino is going to do? I don't think so. In his back pocket, he's got 200 letters of support from the 211 FAs saying that they're going to back him to be re-elected as FIFA president next year. So the big question is, how damaged has he been by this scandal? He's had so many scandals. I mean, how many scandals were there during the World Cup that we've just had? And he carries on and he carries on and he keeps getting the votes. I think he's been seriously damaged. I think he's in a lot of trouble at the moment. I think Alexander Ceferin is his nemesis. Obviously, the two of them don't like each other. Ceferin has got a totally different idea of how football should be run. I think what is interesting to see over the next few days, weeks, months, is will anybody come out and stand against Gianni Infantino? Will there be enough people now? We know in UEFA there are, but will there be people in South America, in Asia, in Africa, North America, Central America, who'll be saying, look, yeah, Gianni's made us a lot of money, but we really need to get somebody else in. I'm not sure whether that will happen. There's lots of politics, lots of intrigue, a very, very interesting story and a big split between UEFA and FIFA. But if you're a football fan, I think this evening you'll be delighted in the way this man has responded and led the way again to these really crazy, controversial plans.
Absolutely. Kaveh Solokol, our chief correspondent, thank you very much. Well, Lacroix's signing takes Chelsea to the top of the big spenders list this summer, ahead of Spurs. They've become the first team to spend over £250 million in this window. Speaking of Spurs, Roberto De Zerbi says they're working on what he's calling another transfer bomb. The Spurs boss claims he's like a shark in the transfer window. Well, Spurs have already spent around £237 million on 6 new signings this summer, including the £100 million on Sandro Tonali and the £85 million on Mateus Fernandes. Well, as we know, Savinho wants to leave Manchester City for Spurs, but De Zerbi's hinted that another significant signing could arrive first. Speaking to Football London, whilst on Tottenham's pre-season tour of Australia and New Zealand, De Zerbi said this: "In the transfer market, when I want one player, I become like a shark. No chance to say no. The transfer market is not finished for sure, but we completed 60% of our project in the transfer market. Now we have another bomber." Spurs fans must be loving that. Now, Brentford have agreed a £41 million deal for the Lens midfielder Mamadou Sangare. Now, he was key in helping Lens finish second in Liga last season and is preparing to travel to the UK for a medical. The move wouldn't yet be a club record because it's just below the £42 million that Brentford paid Bournemouth last summer for Dango Ouattara.